This is Keys to the Shop. Today we have part 2 of our live interview series on the show floor of Coffee Fest Chicago. Well, hey everyone, this is Chris DiFiorio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to part 2 of this live interview series that we conducted on the show floor of Chicago Coffee Fest back in June of 2022. I'm really excited to present these next 3 interviews. If you're listening to this and you have not listened to part 1, be sure to do that. And like I said, this was done at Coffee Fest, and I'm not sure if you're aware of Coffee Fest, but Coffee Fest is a trade show that's been going on for specialty retailers for 30 years. That's 3 decades of basically what I consider the industry's most practical, useful, in-depth, and resourcing event that you can possibly go to. There is an incredible range of topics covered through free and accessibly priced lectures, workshops, and trainings. There's latte art competition, cold brew competition. Of course, there's the trade show floor where you can interact with vendors that will help you supply your coffee shop. There's a lot of panel discussions, presentations, tons of opportunity for networking and community as well. So there's a great energy always at Coffee Fest, and people walk away equipped for success and set on the right path to build their coffee shop dreams. So if you go to coffeefest.com, you can register for Los Angeles and Seattle. Those are the remaining shows for this year. There's a whole new lineup next year of another 4 shows. And if you use the code KEYS, K-E-Y-S, you can get 50% off your registration when you go to register yourself and your team over at coffeefest.com. And I would love to see you there because I'm going to be there presenting as well. I'm a head judge for latte art, so I will be right in the middle of the judging table and walking around the show floor and probably doing more live interviews. So please do say hello. And of course, go visit coffeefest.com right now, learn more about this, and register today. Well, everyone, today is part 2, the final installment of our series of live interviews from Coffee Fest Chicago, and we have another 3 amazing presenters to talk to. We're going to be talking about Asian coffee with Marissa Childers of Tanbrown Coffee. Then we're going to be talking all about branding and your shop's identity with Jess Gulino of Terza Coffee. Finally, we'll end part 2 and our live interview series with the great Tony Dreyfuss, co-founder of Metropolis Coffee in Chicago, where we're going to talk to him about building a training system that actually is effective and sticks. So obviously, just by talking about who's coming up, you know you're in for a lot of value. And we're starting, like I said, with Marissa Childers, who is the co-founder, along with her business partner, Ethan Darla, of Tanbrown Coffee. Tanbrown Coffee was started by these 2 coffee professionals as a way to create a space where they can showcase the kind of variety and complexity and quality of Asian coffee, as well as a space that can cultivate community and rewrite the narrative around Asian coffee and Asians in coffee. You can find more information about their company over at tanbrown.coffee. And in this conversation with Marissa today, we get to chat about Asian coffees and the industry's perception of them and how things are changing. Not just how Tanbrown is helping rewrite the narrative about what we should think about coffees from China and Sumatra, etc., but also how the industry is starting to open up and embrace more and more coffees from origins that we have sort of a internal bias towards, that we've sort of been taught we should have. So I'm really grateful for the work of Marissa and Ethan at Tanbrown, and I'm really happy to have gotten a chance to sit down with Marissa at Coffee Fest. So here now is my chat about rewriting the narrative of Asian coffees with co-founder of Tanbrown Coffee, Marissa Childers. Marissa, welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
I'm doing well. What about you?
I'm doing good. You are a co-owner of Tanbrown Coffee, right?
Yes.
And how long has that been open?
So we actually launched in January, so we're little babies, but it's been really fun.
I really enjoy your accounts. I follow you on Instagram. I enjoy the branding, and I love what y'all do. So congrats on that. And you are a part of a panel about Asians and coffee.
Yes.
And this is a subject that we've seen popping up all over the industry, and it's very pertinent, especially as we see a lot of more appreciation for coffees coming from Southeast Asia and other origins that are a little bit unfairly derided, I would say, in the industry. But in your experience, like on this panel, you're having this conversation amongst yourselves about your experiences in the coffee industry. I'm curious how you have channeled your experiences into Tanbrown and what you want to accomplish with your company.
Yeah, so I think some of the experiences that I've had, I mean, working on the floor and things like that as a barista originally, really like craving knowledge and education. It was one of those things where I was very frustrated, I guess, and it was kind of something where I had decided, I'm very stubborn, so there was something where I was just like, I want to do my own thing because I don't see myself in the shops that I'm working in. I have heard so many things about Asian coffees every time I bring them up, where it's been, oh, well, it's not that good. Or like people only know of Sumatra, and sometimes they're like, oh, well, I don't like Sumatran coffees. And then it's like, but why? So when it came to channeling my experiences of just being Asian in coffee and then like working and like wanting to build something else and channeling it into Tanbrown, it was something where both Ethan, who's my business partner, and we just wanted to have fun and show up and be present. And part of it is just like with us doing this thing, also cross-cultural collaboration. It's one of those things where not that this was our goal or anything, but other people see that. And we want to be able to show people who look like us and who may not see themselves in coffee, show them that they can do this. And you don't have to have crazy amounts of experience to just kind of start something.
What goes into the idea that, you mentioned, I don't like Sumatra, I don't like these other coffees. Now, people aren't out there trying to say, let me find, I'm not trying to find a coffee to hate, but it feels like it's just kind of passed down from barista to barista. What kind of goes into that?
Well, I think part of what goes into that is just this false narrative of what does complexity look like and what is interesting. And we've seen that the SCA flavor wheel really leans more towards Eurocentric kind of palette. And, it's okay in some senses, but it also goes into the coffee grading where people will go in and score and grade and deem fruitier and more nuanced and in that way and floral coffees as good.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where they get really high scores. But I think part of it comes from what flavor notes and what different things people can pick out and what they're familiar with from their cultural background. I've had a lot of different coffees that are more complex on spice levels and different things that are just so fascinating, but that complexity is not as validated within the specialty coffee industry.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a lot of space to look at room for experimentation and those types of things as well. And I think it's really easy to look at one thing as in one place as a monolith if you don't have other narratives coming from there.
It comes down to what you said, permission to do things that are you can do this. So you see yourself in coffee, it feels like it gives you permission because everybody has insecurity.
Yeah.
And when you have insecurity, you just kind of default to the lowest common denominator, the white walls, the succulents, all that, and nothing wrong with that, I guess. But is it truly an expression of who you are? And is it rooted in something that is meaningful to you? And sometimes we disallow people from getting into that space because it feels too risky, because it's not popular. But then companies like yours come around and it feels like, oh, well, I guess that idea that I had wasn't so crazy after all.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when you talk with people about Asian coffee and just the adjusting the narrative, what is it that people who listen to a podcast like this or participate in the panel that you participated in or listen to it, when they go back to their coffee shops, what are the practical steps people can do to sort of change that narrative with an already existing model?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it just involves coffee in general, right? Where I think we put coffee in a box or bag, literally, whatever. But we have this one fixed idea of what good looks like and what specialty looks like.
Yeah.
And I think broadening that horizon and thinking about, like, we wouldn't judge our friends in this way. We don't judge, or we shouldn't judge people this way when we meet them. Why do we assume that coffee's going to be a certain way?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is an educational kind of thing where people can do research on different origins and like what they entail. But also I think it's a level of shops like actually tasting these coffees, like people in their QC labs and roasting, taking a chance on something like Asian coffees or different experimentation things, even if it's for a short time.
Doesn't feel like much of a chance anymore. Like there may have been people out there that maybe like blazed the trail that did take a risk or quote unquote risk, right? But now there's so many heroes of the Asian coffee market to allow you to have so much variety. You can choose coffees from China, from different origins in the Philippines and Vietnam, and so it feels like there's a way to verify that what you're going to get's not actually that much of a risk.
Yeah, I don't think it's that much of a risk. I think it's like definitely one of those things, though, that is you still don't see it very actively in shops. I think you see it with more like smaller roasters, but then there's like the bigger shops who may not carry something like that. And it's just really interesting because I continue to see like larger companies still use the same kind of wet hold Sumatra or whatever, because that is their idea of what that coffee is, right? And I think part of it is like a consumer issue as well. So it does still, I think, involve a little bit of education on that front. Yeah.
So education for discovering different varieties of flavors within a particular origin.
Yeah.
Where you have the Sumatran, the earthiness, it's this 25% of our blends, that's its role, right? When you communicate to customers flavors of coffees whose origins they think they know because you've marketed about what it is, but then you throw them a curveball by saying, this is also from Indonesia, but it tastes like it's from Brazil, or it tastes like something, from Hawaii or something like that. How would you overcome that initial kind of that inertia of just recalibrating people's expectations?
That's such an interesting question, because I think it's so hard because people love having something that they expect. Like, I think part of it too is like coffee as a product, no matter where it is origin-wise, there's always going to be, like, there's going to be really amazing and bright and fantastic coffees that people get really, really excited about, and then there's going to be not so great coffees. And I think part of it is looking at regions as like different places that will express different qualities, and there's going to be different kinds of coffees coming from there. Not all coffee is going to be the same.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the shift in the narrative is going to be more people trying different things rather than just one company. I think my role in this right now is just choosing coffees that I get excited about and saying like, hey, you should just try this. And I think that's really fun.
Excitement seems like a big part of it. I was talking with somebody about branding earlier, and I think you can overcome a lot of inadequacies by confidence.
Yeah.
And when I say inadequacies in this conversation, it's not like you're trying to make up for a lack of flavor.
Yeah.
You're making up for the understanding gap.
Yeah.
So if you're really excited about it and I like you, I'm probably going to like it, or at least I'm going to give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then in the retail space,
yes.
you have a retail coffee shop?
No, we do not.
You're a
have-
roaster right now.
Yeah, we're just roasting right
Yes.
now. We do pop-ups and things like that, and we have like put our coffee in retail in different places, but
Yeah.
for the most part, we're just doing online.
So if you put your coffee in retail in different places, like when you talk to people about how to talk about the coffees that you roast, what are you most likely going to tell them that you think will equip their staff to represent your heart for that coffee well when you're not there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I end up explaining or communicate when I talk to staff about those types of things. A lot of the partnerships that we have are people who already kind of trust us.
Okay, yeah.
Which is kind of a different situation. But at the same time, I think when we have put our coffee into retail, a lot of the time it has been after we have used it on their machines already. So staff has already had the chance to try it, which is also a very rare situation, I feel like. But I think from the people that I've met and talked to, they'll ask about it and be like, why do you like this? And I'm like, well, here are the characteristics of this coffee that make me really, really excited.
Yeah.
First, I start talking, we have a West Java coffee right now that I really enjoy. And part of the reason why is, yes, it is wet hold and all these things, but it's so surprising because when I first cupped it, it tasted like Pez. And it was it was so surprising to me, and I was super excited that I had this coffee that had this Pez characteristic, had this cola kind of thing going on with it, and it was still really versatile, and I could pull different notes out of it depending on if I had it on espresso versus if I had it as drip. And so I think just whenever I communicate something, a lot of the times I will brew it and ask people how they feel about it and what they taste from it.
Right. And then they respond, sometimes with their own interpretations of it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's important to get them to really connect with it. So you're kind of coaching them along, right?
Yeah, and I think part of what I really value in coffee is education and transferring that kind of knowledge to people. And so, for example, when I was working at a shop before and managing, it was one of those moments where I would make my staff try everything. And one of my most favorite moments is literally just brewing something and being like, here, try this. And then not really tell anyone what it is or anything like that. And then I'll ask them, what do you think about it? And you can see people at first feel really unsure of whether or not they're going to be right or wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And I think breaking down, first being okay, do you like this? And then people can say yes or no. It's okay to have those kinds of opinions. And then if they do like it, seeing them get excited about why. And I think that has been something that has been really vital for us to talk about our coffee with different people, and that has been something that I've really enjoyed doing when I've had background in a shop setting.
Okay, so as you're talking about, here, try this.
Yeah.
And you really are excited about certain coffees, so you just want other people to try them through your roastery, right?
Yeah.
And this excitement that people have for sharing things with others flies in the face of that consistency that roasters are often after, because we do a lot of polling of what consumers like, and we're going to use this data about what they like to limit our options to only those things. Do you feel like some of that playing it safe is why we're not giving some Asian coffees a chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably some of the reason. I think people like to play safe because they know what's going to make profits.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end of the day, I mean, there is user or customer data for a reason, and I think that's important. But I also think that innovation and excitement and growth can't happen without new things.
Yeah, and that it does feel inherently risky to do. But I want to talk about how, as a business owner, and the idea of giving other people opportunity or a vision to start something on their own, how does entrepreneurship kind of usher in the next wave of more diversity in product offering and social diversity in coffee?
Oh man, I think being in Atlanta is a really interesting place because I know so many people who are starting their own things. And I think part of the reason why is because we don't see ourselves as business owners, like in coffee. Like a lot of the business owners that I've worked for and things like that in the past, it just didn't look like me. And I think people are tired, and that is something that is driving, that will honestly, I think, drive diversity in some ways, at least owning businesses. I think also resources that have been given by organizations like Get You Some Gear or Glittercat or Get You Some Gear and Glittercat. Those are two very vital like organizations that have helped kind of spur this movement of people feeling the agency to be able to take up that kind of space.
Yes.
And I think that has been really valuable for, I know, my own personal journey as well as a lot of other entrepreneurs that I know who are just starting small. And part of it is just also showing that you can do it. Like, there's no rule book, and the industry is very wide open to just kind of do something. Also, being able to look at someone and say, you don't have to quit your job immediately to do something.
Yes.
Like, just start a project, start something that you enjoy.
Yeah, and so now, as you've been open for, as a business owner since January, and I'll kind of wrap up with this question for you. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned in the process of running your own business and roastery? Because you've had coffee experience before, but this must be slightly different.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurial-wise has been, it is very different. I think with having a background in coffee and design work, it's just like kind of marrying those two things and solving a problem. But I also think that there are a lot of things that I have learned about myself that I don't like doing. Like, I hate doing taxes. I hate doing like invoices. I hate doing all those types of things. And that's why I am so grateful to have Ethan as my business partner, because we balance each other out in that way. And I have learned that there are also more people out there that will help you than you think. And I think something that I've seen more since January is just the fact that, like, I have the opportunity and space to claim the projects that I'm working on and be proud of them. And that is really hard.
Yeah, because when you're working for other people, it's theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great sense of pride there. That well said. Well, thank you very much. This was amazing, Marissa. I appreciate everything that you've shared, and of course, there's much more. I encourage anybody to follow you on Instagram. Go to your website. By the way, what are those so people can follow you?
Oh yeah, the Instagram for Tanbrown is at Tanbrown Coffee, and my personal is at Marissa Chan. And you can also follow Coffee Asians on Instagram, which is another thing that I'm running, kind of. And the website for Tanbrown is tanbrown.coffee.
.coffee. I love all the .coffees coming out. It's so
I
great.
think they're really fun.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you found that really enlightening. And most of all, I hope that it really gives you some ideas of what you can do to help support and purchase and continue the momentum towards opening up specialty coffee to more origins and expressions of origins through your own roastery in the coffees you purchase. And I've said this actually on a live stream that I did on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. And it was that it really just takes a lot of people taking some steps toward the goal that you want to see happen. Just because you can't purchase a lot of coffee doesn't mean you shouldn't purchase any coffee. So that means either purchasing coffee from Tanbrown as a consumer, or companies like them, or as a roaster, purchasing green coffee from origins that are producing great coffees from origins that might be typically overlooked. So there's a lot of great steps that you can take here. And in this conversation, I think Marissa did a great job breaking down what's happening and how we can be a part of making positive change. So a really big thank you to Marissa for being a guest on the show, sitting down with me at Coffee Fest. It was such a pleasure. So again, you can go visit Tanbrown.coffee to purchase their coffee, to learn more about their company, and follow them on Instagram at Tanbrown Coffee. Next up, we are going to be having a conversation all about branding with Jess Gulino of Terza Coffee in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, Jess wears a lot of hats at Terza, everything from barista work to roasting, but also in branding. And this is where we focus our conversation with Jess, as we got to sit down at Coffee Fest to talk about exactly what we as coffee entrepreneurs should be thinking about when we are trying to figure out how to represent our company in logos and in packaging, etc., to the public. Whether you're just starting your coffee shop or you already have decided on certain brand elements and colors and things like that, but you're going to probably change some stuff in the future, or you're thinking about doing it. We kind of cover both situations, and we ask lots of philosophical questions about whether you want legacy versus optimizing your logo. And we talk about lots of questions that will help you kind of narrow down where do you land in terms of making decisions about branding and the identity of your coffee shop. Because ultimately, when we're thinking about names and colors and pictures and things like that, it comes down to who we are, what we want to represent, and how we want to portray that to a customer. So Jess does a great job helping us come to some conclusions here in this conversation. So I'm excited to share this with you. Here now is my conversation about branding and your shop's identity with Jess Gulino of Terza Coffee. Well, Jess, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well.
You having a good coffee fest?
I'm having a good coffee fest. Honestly, like most people here, I've had too much coffee and I'm feeling really wired.
I love it. Yeah. I'm excited to talk to you about branding because that seems to be, and it legitimately is, one of the really important things about standing out as a coffee shop, first of all. But and really just feeling like you're communicating your values to your customers through imagery and other areas besides image, but image is one of the big ones. So tell me a little bit about how you came into the world of branding and how that coincides with coffee to where now you're giving this conversation, this talk.
Yeah. The thing about coffee in general is that it's more than just a beverage. It's an experience. It really creates community and belonging. And I believe that with good branding, clear branding, beautiful branding, I believe you can really attract people into that space, and they could create essentially a third place in their life, a third home, so to speak. So coffee for me is more than just drinking a cappuccino and then heading to work. It's a place where I meet with my friends. It's a place where I have meetings. There's baristas that I'm friends with. And so I think as a whole, branding is just something that's worth investing in.
Talking about creating a third place. So a coffee shop, people are attracted to a third place automatically. They want to go somewhere other than home and work. Coffee shops, bars, barbershops for some. So the branding part of it that helps create the third place. What is it specifically about how people portray themselves that helps usher people into that social experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a big believer in you project what you are. And I think that when you create a space, it's a reflection of what's going on inside of you. And it's the quirkiness of you, it's the specialness of you. And I guess to answer your question, I just think that branding just really, it's attractive because people want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
Even if it's not everyone, it's definitely a specific group of people.
Okay, so coffee shops are generally, how do we go about branding in ways that you find ineffective?
Ineffective or
Yeah,
effective?
ineffective, like bad branding. Like if you had to look at a coffee shop and be like, yeah, that's an impediment to your brand identity right there.
I feel like it kind of can go either way, either too generic, so not really unique, not really special, kind of bland, or it could get too specific, like a Comic Sans or a Papyrus. Probably should stay away from either of those fonts.
Okay.
But also, I mean, there's also an element of genuineness. People like Papyrus.
I guess so. Okay, so you're saying that it can be too general and it is just not well thought out. So what is it not communicating if it's not well thought out? Like, what should I be trying to tell the life story of my coffee bar when people see my logo? Or because that's what a lot of people do. They're trying to like name their coffee shop. Or they're trying to come up with an image for it. It's like, I want to communicate all the stuff that I love about my shop in this one image. Let's go. But you can't really do that, can you?
Totally. Yeah. You want to keep it simple. You want to keep it clear. And I guess when it really comes down to it, like a practical would be, what are 3 adjectives that you would describe yourself or describe your space? More specifically, not just like how would you describe it, but how do you want people to experience your shop? You know, like there are a lot of coffee shops that I would describe as edgy and unique and maybe even a little spooky. There's one shop specifically that's pretty spooky. The owners are really into like horror films.
Oh yeah,
so
I've heard about places
branding
like that.
reflects that. Like it's a little spooky. Yeah, that's really the best word for it.
Yeah, and they want that though.
But it's an experience. Yeah, and I mean, I may not like horror films, but I enjoy the genuineness of that brand.
That's a personality.
Yeah.
And it would be a boring world if we all had the same personality.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And it stands to reason that a lot of coffee bars out there right now are, out of fear of making the wrong decision, are just not making decisions about branding, right? So they just like, okay, look, I like white walls and succulents just as much as anybody.
Totally.
But there has to be something other than the fact that you like them going on here. Maybe it's fear of committing to being genuine.
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, if for anyone who's listening and wants to have a shop or has a shop and is looking to rebrand, my biggest encouragement is just no fear. Be yourself. People like when people are genuine.
Yeah.
People don't like when people are surfacey and not genuine.
That's true. That's true.
Disingenuous, I suppose, is the word. But yeah, just no fear. I mean, even if you think your style is a little weird or a little out there, I would go for it. And a little bit of me would be like, just be open to feedback. You know, sometimes it's better to be too much and pull back rather than be too little and try to be big again. Okay,
so give me an example of being too little with your branding and then trying to increase that the breadth of it.
Absolutely. So an example would be a coffee shop that I have one a little bit in mind, but I won't say it.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Basically, just like the brand is, think like industrial, clean, which is totally a look, totally a brand. Maybe like a animal on the wall, or you know, just something kind of masculine, but not quite cabiny. And to be honest, it just doesn't seem like there's quite a presence. My guess would be that owner is maybe not as present as they should be. Because that's kind of the vibe that I get from the coffee shop is, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of investment here. It feels like they kind of just picked something that was clean and trendy for a moment, but not necessarily, I guess, an expression of who they are.
They bought the coffee shop kit and they put it in place.
That's exactly it.
Like they're a franchise of one.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, but you can definitely get bigger. I mean, practically, I would add more things that you like. I mean, I would ask your staff, what do you identify with this coffee shop? Like, what about this experience makes us unique from other coffee shops? Even Starbucks can have more of an identity than some local shops.
It's true. And again, back to the idea of being fearful, and or not present, not invested in the idea of creating a space that is reflective of what you like, or just the fact that there are things that your customers like and your community likes that you can put in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talk about community a lot, but sometimes fail to really connect it to what we do. And seems like, creating a space, this is especially true when we talk about gentrification and creating spaces that are welcoming to all different kinds of people, but we only have a few different kinds of coffee shops that we're willing to open, right?
It's tricky. It's new territory, and I like to think everyone's doing their best, or at least hope they are.
Yeah, and sometimes people need to be pushed a little bit, because our best is often what we believe we can do in the moment. And if you're given permission, which I imagine after a session like yours, you have a little bit more permission to express.
Absolutely. And we're always growing.
Okay.
I mean, there's always more room to change things and throw things out or add things, etc.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. There's two different schools of thought. There's people who want a legacy brand and they want to keep it forever, and it will always be like 30 years later, it'll be the exact same brand, and they love the idea of never changing their colors, their logo, or anything, because it'll mean something kind of historic, I suppose. But then there are people who take the liberty to change their mascots and logos, and even sometimes their colors, with bare threads of themes running through the whole thing. But it just seems like they're changing a lot. What's better?
There's definitely...
That's an unfair question.
I feel like the answer is there's a balance, which there is. There's definitely a balance. There's something about consistency that makes people feel safe. And, there are bands out there, like in Parks and Rec, the band in there, they change their name all the time. And one of the jokes is like, they'll never have a following because they keep changing the name of the band. So there's definitely like you don't want to do that. There is an element of like relationship that you're building with the community around you and with your customer base. But at the same time, I think that pressure of creating something really amazing and perfect right now that we're going to keep for 30 years is just too much. And for me, I wouldn't be able to create anything under that kind of pressure. I would feel just way too much stakes, too many stakes. And I just think about any long-term brand, like even Nike. I mean, for the most part, they're very recognizable. They've been very consistent in their brand identity, but they've also changed quite a lot, and they've added some things and taken away some things. They've modernized some things,
but the swoosh lives on.
Yeah, that's true. The swoosh does
live
on.
The Adidas 3 stripes lives on.
It does.
But they change the skin, they change the color, the marketing, and all that. How can marketing play an important role in branding to bring the brand to lots of different places in a way that creates consistency in the minds of the consumer, that what they've just experienced is recognizable? Almost like if somebody says, hey, I saw somebody, I thought it was you, they look just like you, right? Or my podcast music, for example, has been on soup commercials on YouTube because it was purchased from a site where people can purchase it. So people are like, oh my gosh, I heard your music, but it's my music. They said your music, right? So for a coffee shop, you want to know that people are going to look at your cup sleeve, whether it's in a trash can by a bus stop or at the architectural firm's conference table. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing, right? So how do you create that? How does marketing help that, or what channels are most maybe appropriate to market?
Yeah, I mean, practically, like what you just mentioned, marketing on your actual wares, so cups, sleeves, etc. I mean, that's huge. People see that all the time, everywhere. It's free advertising. I'd also recommend thinking outside the box. I know coffee shops that hold like garage sales, sponsored by this specific coffee shop or organized by this coffee shop. Just really brings the community together and kind of makes the coffee shop more of that community base and less of like a source of caffeine. Obviously, like merchandise like t-shirts and those kind of things are really important. I've heard of coffee shops that have printed like their logos on tiny foam footballs and thrown them out at like high school events, which is definitely a outside the box thing. But
and we need a cold brew cannon.
Yeah, exactly, cold brew cannon. Also, just definitely, I don't know if it's within everyone's range, but reaching out to a lot of other restaurants or breweries that can also supply your coffee or at least your brand of coffee. That's a great way to kind of spread the word. There are so many breweries that need coffee for porters and stouts, and even some lagers, and that's a great way to kind of get your name out there and just show that you're versatile.
And versatility is part of what makes people interesting, and I suppose you could think about your brand as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think of my brand as a person, because it's me. I mean, it's me, but it's also it's a group. It's not just one person, of course. Typically, coffee shops have at least one, maybe two, etc. Owners. So it's just kind of finding that summary of all of you and just kind of making it a person.
Yeah, and so you want it to be an interesting person, somebody who's consistent, somebody who's, you want to have invited over to parties.
Totally.
And you need to be social for that to happen,
yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Make friends to have friends.
Social media is huge. I forget about that, to be honest.
Yes, I'm not the greatest at social media personally, but it's just the idea that there are lots of different, like we're in a coffee fest right now here in Chicago. There are, reasonably speaking, groups of people like us for different industries and just different interests and professions around your city where they're just looking for something to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You work in coffee?
Yeah.
Really? That's so interesting. Tell me more. So what's the best coffee machine? So all these questions that come up. I always think about how there's this thirst, no pun intended, for coffee that people have when they realize that you're a source for it. And so, I guess, like you're saying, get out there and expose your brand to people, and that personality will kind of take over, right?
Absolutely. And I think we want our target audience to be everyone. Of course, we're very inclusive, we're very open, but also just being aware of your typical audience. A lot of coffee shops appeal to college students, and but then there are also those coffee shops out there that serve amazing breakfasts, so they appeal to a lot of retired aged peoples. And I think being aware of who you already are targeting and who you're reaching naturally, and then kind of putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and trying to reach other people groups.
Yeah. Outside of the horror genre.
Yeah, absolutely. That horror genre, it's a real thing.
No, and that's the line you want to ride, is like you can be all things to all people, and you can be kind of a corporate entity, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
No, not at all.
But then you hyper focus on the horror or steampunk or it's a bike shop / coffee shop, and
those are big.
There's a portafilter, but it's also a bike spokes, so you're folding it in, right?
You're full of ideas.
Yeah, sure. So I think you definitely want people to find commonality with your brand, but then you want to be able to serve them well, no matter if they identify with your brand or not. So they could tolerate horror movies, but you have the best espresso in town.
Exactly. Right? I mean, I wouldn't go there if the espresso wasn't amazing. At the end of the day, I mean, I guess the real focus is your product. What is your thing? I mean, maybe cold brew is your thing, and that's just like you're killing it, and people love it. Or maybe it's more of a wholesale situation, or maybe it is like a specific latte, like a lavender vanilla latte. Everyone goes to this one shop if you're going to get that lavender vanilla latte. And I just feel like the first step is definitely to figure out, what are you selling? What do you want people to talk about when it comes to your coffee? Okay. And then the second thing would be, what do you want them to experience?
And that brand, will be synonymous with the experience.
Exactly. That's what I think, at least.
But it can't cover up for an experience, because I feel like a lot of people want it to.
Yeah, I would agree. No, I don't. I think people are pretty intuitive. I think they would know.
Yeah, word gets around.
Yeah.
Like, you could have a terrible logo, but you could be like, I love getting a pastrami sandwich from Cat's Deli.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's not a great logo. I mean, compared to, what somebody on Fiverr or whatever, you pay somebody more to do it, they would never invent that logo for you. It's true. But it's well known for one thing, and it would be the pastrami sandwich.
It's true.
Yeah.
There is this coffee shop, not naming any names. I do not like their logo. I think it is so cheesy and funny and weird, but they are some of the best coffee in town. They have amazing breakfast, and like, everyone tells me to go there, but the first time I pulled up, I thought, this can't be the right place, is it?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, because it's like having somebody who you absolutely adore, who as a person is amazing. You always want to be around them.
Yep.
They're lovely, but they just won't fix their tooth. They can, but they refuse. They're fine with it, and it bothers you, and now you feel bad for it bothering you. Like, I feel like, it's an amazing coffee bar, but gosh, their logo, why do I hate their logo so much? But they're great. Yeah. And I guess you can't have a perfect experience in your coffee bar. Like, so let me dig into that a little bit as we wrap up here, because I think it's an interesting idea, because some people hate their logo.
Yeah.
But it's an old, well-loved logo.
Totally.
Right? Maybe this place you're thinking about. The reason they keep it is because people are like, you better not change that, or whatever. So what do you do if you want to get better? If you want to remove that, I don't like that, but you also want to honor tradition?
I mean, that's kind of back to that first question you gave me, which is, do we stick with one thing, pick out our colors, keep it for 30 years, or do we change it all the time and become unrecognizable? In all honesty, I'd probably keep the logo, even if it is cheesy. Then it would become like this joke. Like, our logo, isn't it terrible? Like, it's so funny. But I mean, I don't know. There are different ways that you can either incorporate a different design with it, or maybe just pick a different colored t-shirt and print it on that and see if it looks better. Yeah.
And if you just stick with it long enough, it'll come back in style, apparently.
Absolutely.
Jess, this was great to talk to you about branding.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. A pleasure. Where can people learn more about what you do?
Well, right now, I'm working for Terza Coffee Roastery. It is in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a roaster, account manager, machine fixer, in-house graphic designer. I do a little bit of everything.
Hey.
And I'm eager to learn. Love coffee. I've been in coffee for almost 7 years now. So
congrats.
Definitely loving it. Come in, get a coffee from me, or just chat with me about coffee, because I love talking about it. So
amazing. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, everyone, this was a great conversation to sort of dive down into the deeper meaning of what branding does for a business. And certainly this is something that I think you might need to chew on a little bit more before you start making decisions about branding for your shop. But I think we're in a better place as a result of Jess's guidance here. So thank you very much to Jess Gulino for being on the show. If you want to learn more about Terza Coffee in Cincinnati, you can go to their website, terzacoffee.com, to do so. And now for our third interview of part 2, and really the last of our series of live interviews from Coffee Fest, we have the great Tony Dreyfuss, who is the co-founder with his father of Metropolis Coffee in Chicago, quintessential roaster of the third wave and beyond. Metropolis is Chicago coffee, and Tony's passion for community and diversity and culture and rootedness in how you express coffee as a roaster and as a coffee shop really shines through, in not just in his words, but in his presence. When you sit down with him, like I did at Coffee Fest, you can sense that here is somebody who has been shaped by his journey in coffee and has positively shaped coffee itself through the work he does. Today, we'll be talking with Tony specifically about barista training and developing a system that actually is effective and can work not just for your baristas, but also for your wholesale accounts, of which Metropolis has a good many. So since 2003, Tony has been honing all of this, and so you're going to get a lot of value in this conversation. And lastly, what I'll say here is that you should stay tuned, because Tony has recently sat down with me for a full-length Founder Friday interview, which we've already recorded and will be out sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's going to be sometime in the next few months here. So stay tuned for that. So here now is my conversation about designing effective barista training with Tony Dreyfuss. So, Tony Dreyfuss of Metropolis Coffee, welcome to Keys to the Shop on the road here at Coffee Fest in Chicago 2022. How are you?
Chris, I'm great. Thanks. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, we've been catching up. Apparently, it's been 20 years since we last saw each other. We've been busy in coffee, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
No good excuse, though.
So here's the thing. Metropolis is a standard bearer in Chicago. 2003 was when you first opened, correct?
Yeah, 2003, December.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, the third wave coffee movement was just happening. You were kind of like foundational members of that community. And I was saying earlier that it was like Metropolis and Intelligentsia, and there was no other coffee bars in Chicago.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. There were some others, quite a few others. But yes. As far as kind of what you might think of as, early third wave craft coffee, not so much.
Yeah, exactly. And so you made quite a splash. And so you founded this business with your father. So I wanted to... It's really interesting because even today, still, you run it with your father. It's still a family-owned business, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The two of us.
And so now, let me ask how you, really briefly here, because I know we have like from 2003 till today. We're not going to cover all of that. When you first started Metropolis, what was your goal? What was the whole idea of beginning that company?
It was pretty easy, simple. We had fallen in love with coffee and coffee shops. I had worked for Pete's for some years. My dad had been a Indonesian language professor in Seattle,
wow,
correcting papers at kind of some great Seattle, Capitol Hill, cafes like Cafe Vita, and we just loved it. And we didn't really have any big goals. We just wanted to serve great coffee in a cool community, real inclusive. So we opened in the Edgewater neighborhood in Chicago, one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the country.
Nice.
And I think that, I miss those days a lot because we had nothing to prove. We were just having fun, making it up as we went along. It was a blast.
Yeah, everything was new. Like one little tweak that you did to your portafilter or to a brew recipe was a mammoth. It was huge. It sent shockwaves through the industry. We were all pretty tightly connected, right?
It was like that. Yeah, it felt like a really small industry, and there was a lot of energy.
Yeah, quite a bit. So when you just gave a talk on training, and this is something obviously over the course of these years, 20 years, pretty much, when you say 23 right coming up. Yeah. Training is something that every owner kind of sweats a lot, how are we going to train these people? And a lot of us will do trial by fire. We'll do sort of either an aggressive approach to training or no training at all. I'm curious how you trained people in the early days.
It's so funny story about that. I came up as a trainer at Pete's. I mean, I was a manager and then I was a trainer. So I had a lot of experience with training materials, but I neglected to train anyone before we opened our cafe. So we opened it, this is a true story, at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I walk in, I open up the keys to the shop, right?
Yeah.
And Do I get paid every time I say that?
Oh, no, it's
no.
yeah.
I'm just kidding. So I open up the shop, and about an hour and a half in, I realized that there was nobody that could tag me out on the espresso machine. And I had to go to the bathroom really badly, but I couldn't because we were busy because we told everybody to come and visit. So it was hours. I was very uncomfortable, and I remember going home that night at 11, after an 18, 19, 20-hour day. I really got to train some people. And it's been a lot of iterations since then.
Yeah, you really felt it. You need to train some people.
Physically, emotionally, all of it. Yeah, especially physically, Chris.
Yeah, I can't. I'm just feeling uncomfortable hearing you talk about that at the moment. We've all been there. So
and of course, you're pouring coffee all day too, so it makes that sound as well, which is even worse.
Oh gosh,
it's like a trigger point.
Yeah, there's something about that. So when you were training people, what did you do? Because you used to be at Pete's, and I'm assuming that you took a lot of cues from Pete's.
I did, but back then, you know how it is when you're new at something, but you think you know everything? So I have no idea.
You
have
what
no
you're
idea?
Talking about. Yeah. No.
I was saying it like rhetorically, but your sarcasm fits right in. So I wrote a manual, but it wasn't really a manual. It was more like a book, right? It was like everything I know about coffee in one manual, and it was all about why and philosophically speaking and yada yada. Because back, and it was so unusable. It was useless. And then I would train people, but it was a mess. And beyond the manual, I didn't really have much of a system built into the training program. A manual is not the be-all and end-all. It's just the beginning of the thing.
Yeah.
So it just defines the standards. About, 10 years and 10,000 trained baristas later, some of them I trained, 6 or 7 times over and over again with the same information. I kind of cleaned up the program a bit and came up with a new way of doing it for our company.
Okay, so a new way of doing it based on what you knew at the time was... Well, okay, let's back up because you didn't know at the time. You created it.
Yeah.
What made you know that you had
frustration.
A useless manual?
It was resentment and frustration.
Okay.
So, basic things. First, you train the same people over and over again. And then if they're doing something that you don't agree with, it's hard to articulate exactly what they're doing wrong. That the information might vary from training to training without an established protocol. So you can't quite remember if you how much work you put in for this one barista on ice drinks or something.
Right.
So I didn't have a lockdown flow really, or even subject matter.
Makes sense.
Exactly. So it was like, when you storm a castle, in the old shows, and you probably know a little bit about that, but you see like a soldier dying with a sword in his chest, and he's like, make sure you have a training checklist, and then he dies. And it's like, I kept learning these things, mostly because I was so upset with myself for like screwing it up again. So it's hard won, I guess, It's hard won.
So all these times that you had to go back and reiterate unnecessarily things, you started to get the idea that maybe there should be more detail in practical content in the training, both the actual training and the material. So what was the first step in making this training, like your talk today, that actually sticks?
So there's a few parts to it.
Okay.
One is culture, like setting a culture around the idea that there are standards in our shop. When I was writing my presentation for Coffee Fest, I was in a shop and I heard the baristas talking about, how do you make this drink? I don't know, I learned from this person, you make it in this way. So the first thing was saying, okay, there is a standard and there is a manual that's attached to that standard. So the next thing is you have to write this manual. Now, I learned from writing the manual so many times that for me, I think my manual is more of a how-to manual, not a why we do it this way, but more this is very specifically how you do it. Mm-hmm. I think that I've learned over the years that the philosophical implications of the actions that we take behind the bar are something to worry about later. At first, first and foremost, just learn the basic mechanics of it, get the basics down.
Why is it that, because we come in with the why.
Right.
We like that. We
Right.
like philosophy.
Yep.
Of
You don't.
this,
I think we don't know enough until we know enough. So I think it's kind of sophomoric to ponder the. This is why we. Also, I think it's too much information. People really get overwhelmed and they get in the weeds about wicking and channeling, and it's like, no, just do it like this, and we can talk about that later. Once you tamp 500,000 shots in a row, then we can talk about it.
Right.
Get your
Basics.
reps in.
Yeah, and then
Right.
it builds a character or foundation that you can actually support that other stuff.
You have enough
right?
knowledge to understand the why. So then the next thing is I took my manual and I developed it into modules.
Okay.
So it's a module-based system. So, for example, there's like a drip coffee module. And as a wholesaler, it's especially important because a busser at a restaurant that just brews drip coffee doesn't need my Espresso 101 module or my More About Beans module or whatever, or my Train the Trainer module.
Yeah.
What they need is the information that they need. So I broke it down into parts because I think chunking information is better. I think it's more relatable. I think it's more absorbable. And then I built a certification program around the modules. So when a barista or coffee shop worker or somebody that works with coffee in some way works their way through a module, first of all, they're tested on the information, so they can't just phone it in during the training. And second, they get some recognition that they've completed some part of the coffee training, and it's physical, like it's an actual physical certificate, and there's a lot of fanfare around it.
Yeah.
Even though it's a piece of paper, right?
Sure. It means a lot.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it does, and I think a lot of people want that recognition, especially younger baristas that are coming up through, and. So then, the final thing is there's a culture of accountability around it, where everybody in the shop is expected to uphold the standards. So it's expected that we have a mentorship program where more seasoned baristas guide newer certificate receiving baristas through kind of the initial early days.
Okay, and I want to ask about the modules, because it seems like you have the ability to then, with this module system, go back and refresh, not in total, but you have access to different parts, so it's easier to help somebody troubleshoot, because you could have somebody get the certificate, right? But that doesn't mean that they're in the clear.
Totally. Exactly. And I think what's really useful about it is by having very specific measurable standards, and the module's built on this idea of standards, and the standards have to be measurable, and quality and flavor are not measurable, in my opinion. Truly.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm sure people are screaming at their radios now or whatever they listen to. But so by having a written standard that's measurable, then if there's a conflict in the job that a barista is doing, it's about, it's not a personality conflict anymore. There's the objective third party of the manual that we've all agreed is kind of the god of the program. Okay.
No, that's good. I like that, the god of the program. So let me ask about the quality and flavor thing. Such an incendiary comment. How about how dare
a little
you?
bit, yeah.
So
is that a hot take?
Maybe, but I think you're right. Like, it's so subjective. And with how many stores do you have right now?
One cafe, and we're opening a second at O'Hare this fall.
Okay. It's okay. I thought you had more than one cafe.
No, we're not really a retailer. I mean, we are, but we're
Yeah. So when you train people to recognize that they've done a good job, where does taste and sensory fit into that?
It sort of doesn't, except that so the standards are written based on the flavor that we as a brand are trying to get out of the coffee or out of the beverage or the product, say. So if they make something to the standard, then we'll taste it and talk about the qualities of it. But it's not a... there's been so many situations over the years where somebody will dial in a shot to flavor, and it's everybody's different,
Yeah.
and it just creates it's a hornet's nest.
So it's easier to achieve consistent flavor when you're not really trying to go by flavor.
Absolutely, of course it is.
Yeah.
Right. It makes sense on the face of it, doesn't it?
I guess so. Like, but if you're just starting out, the first thing that you'd want to say to somebody is like, okay, here's our espresso blend. It has chocolates, cherries, and almonds.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you taste that, you've dialed in the shot, and I'll give you some leeway in terms of output, how much coffee you know, what the grind is. So just dial it in. And to them, that seems like they're empowering the baristas, and that makes their job as a barista more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like you might be shooting yourself in the foot.
I can see why you would say that. It hasn't been my experience that it's worked out that way, though.
Okay.
I think what I've seen is when baristas are trying to hit a flavor note out of coffee, the way people perceive flavor, and I'm speaking as a Q grader as well,
yeah.
is wildly different. So one person's chocolate is another's passion fruit. And you know, there's no way to say this is what chocolate should taste like. It's like telling you what blue should look like. It's in your eyes, you know. But I can tell you 18 grams in, you know, 32 to 35 grams out over 23 to 28 seconds with this coloration.
Yeah, and that's a lot more objective, and you get more consistency.
Specific, yeah.
Now, for your wholesale accounts,
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of thing you do as well. So
we do train our wholesale accounts.
okay,
Correct.
Is there much of a difference between the things that you do in training for wholesale versus the one cafe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. In our own cafe, you know, we have a lot more control over what it means to be certified or to live up to the standard. In our wholesale accounts, it's somebody else's business. It's none of my business. I can make suggestions, you know, and we can provide our materials, our written materials. In fact, in a lot of cases, we adapt our written materials to their standards or their products.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their branding. But it's not that it's not my job, it is, but it's none of my business because it's their business.
Well put. I almost feel like some of the like a wholesale training program almost would be a distillation of what the most important universals are for training. Mm-hmm. What do you find travels from your training for in-house to wholesale that is the absolute must and universal truth of what makes training stick?
It is very hard to say, except that we have a couple brands that we put out there, in particular our flagship espresso blend, Redline.
Okay.
So with that, there are specific specs, and we'd like the coffee to taste roughly within those specs. So, you know, dose, yield, time, temp, you know, and we'll calibrate the equipment for it. And the same is true in our drip coffee program, where, you know, we have our standard for dose, our freshness standard, you know, the calibration standards for the equipment that we use. Real kind of bread and butter stuff. Presentation standards, though, I think that's, you know, kind of up to your brand, right? So there are some brands that we sell coffee to, and I wouldn't want to stop, that have nothing to do with latte art, and you know their drinks are very different than ours, and it's great. Their customers love it, and it's about so much more than you know, a narrow belief in aesthetic quality of coffee.
So I want to wrap this up by asking this question, which is, after 20 years of doing this, and you started with one philosophy, which was to kind of start with philosophy, and before recording, you told me that you've changed a little bit about your perspective of coffee itself. Like, there's intrinsic value of coffee, but then there's the extrinsic value of coffee, and these days you're more extrinsic with things, right? So explain a little bit about that and how that relates to the way you educate people in coffee through training.
So our motto as a company is great coffee for everyone. And what I've come to understand great coffee to be is less about a score or an origin or a flavor note or a roast profile, and more about the value that the coffee provides to the various people that are connected to it. So a coffee is good insofar as it provides value to people that use it, to people that grow it, to people that roast it, you know, that brew it. It's it's not within the coffee. It's the power of the coffee to provide value, or good, I guess. And the more value that it provides, the better it is. And I think that has been a sea change in the way that I think about the industry and the way that I think about coffee. And my company is very aligned with that. My baristas, my roasters, my trainers, my salespeople, we all believe that if we can buy and sell coffee that provides value, we're doing good work. It's not so much about providing a specific flavor profile.
Right. And especially at this stage, in 2003, it was hard to find really good specialty coffee.
Yeah.
Today, talk about sea
you
change.
Can't shake a dead cat
Yeah.
or spin it or whatever you do with a dead cat. What do you do with dead cats, Chris?
I have not had the experience of
No.
managing a dead cat.
No, okay, good.
No, I mean, seriously, though, it is easier to make great coffee than ever. And so now, how do you make coffee great now that we can, just kind of throw a rock and hit great coffee?
Yeah, and my gold is different than your gold. So
Sure.
yeah.
Awesome.
Let's all be happy.
I'm happy to get to talk to you. So
I'm happy too. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Tony. Where can we learn more? Where to order coffee and learn more about Metropolis?
Well, you could stop by our shop at 1039 West Granville in Chicago. You could go to our website, metropoliscoffee.com, or on social media.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Okay, well, obviously, with all this experience that Tony has under his belt, we could have talked quite a lot longer about this subject. But just the idea that we're trying to make things effective and give people the right information for the job that they're actually doing. We talk about this on the show, the pitfall of getting into the philosophy and the esoteric versus the simple and the practical, and breaking it down so that it works for the people it's meant to work for. The baristas, your wholesale accounts. You want to set people up for success, give them measurements, give them the roadmap to success, and the depth and philosophy and the soul and all that will come in later, as Tony said here in this conversation. So big thank you to Tony for making time to sit down with me at Coffee Fest. Of course, you should visit Metropolis Coffee when you're in Chicago, as well as go to their website and buy some coffee. Learn more about what they do at metropoliscoffee.com. And everyone, that is it for our series of live interviews from the show floor, Coffee Fest Chicago. We're going to be probably doing this again in Coffee Fest Los Angeles coming up here at the end of August. So that will probably end up going live sometime in September after the show. But I hope that all of these interviews, all 6 from part 1 and part 2, added value to your life, helped you build a better coffee business for you, your staff, and your customers, your community. That is my ultimate goal with these interviews and what I do at Keys to the Shop. All about helping you get with insights, inspiration, and tools you need to grow, right? So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me about this episode or anything else on Keys to the Shop, definitely send me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com. Don't forget to go to coffeefest.com to learn more about this amazing event. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.